Episode 137 of CppCast with guest Sarah Smith, recorded February 7th, 2018. CppCast is sponsored by ThinkCell Software. They're looking for developers that would want to work on extremely challenging C++ development tasks. In their Berlin-based office, they work with no deadlines, no overtime, and no meetings. If this is for you, go to thinkcell.com/CppCast and apply today. CppCast is also sponsored by Embo++. The upcoming conference will be held in Bochum, Germany from March 9th to 11th. Meet other embedded systems developers working on microcontrollers, alternative kernels, and highly customizable zero-cost library designs. Get your ticket today at embo.io. In this episode, we talk about Outcome finally being accepted into Boost. Then we talk to Sarah Smith. Sarah talks to us about mobile development with C++ and Qt. Welcome to episode 137 of CppCast, the only podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, Rob. How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. It's been an exciting week. I'm sure most of our listeners were watching that the SpaceX launch the other day, which is pretty cool.
I did not even realize it was going to happen. One of my friends sent me an IM with the link to it like a minute before liftoff.
And everyone was talking about it in my company's Slack channel and waiting for the live feed to start. So, yeah, I was definitely interested in watching that. And watching those two boosters land like at the exact same time was just amazing.
Yeah, I was reading a comment that said they had originally announced that they were not going to take the risk of having them land at the same time in case something went wrong, but apparently they just went for hubris and it worked.
Of course, the third one didn't land at all, which is unfortunate.
It landed just very fast.
Very, very fast. And
like 800 miles per hour.
The drone part in the process.
But I'm seriously reminded of like the space race from the 60s and my dad talking about how that kind of thing inspired him to become an engineer and whatever. And I do wonder how many people watch that and are like, holy crap, I'm going to get into aerospace engineering now or something.
Hopefully a lot of people. Yeah, and SpaceX, I think, is always looking for engineers, too. Like,
yes, they did announce their...
too. Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
I think so.
Right.
It's not SpaceX. I'm sure Tesla's looking for a lot. And joining us today is Sarah Smith. Sarah comes to mobile development and entrepreneurship with a background in software engineering from companies like Nokia and Google and over a decade of mobile device experience. She builds on a love of game development since creating D&D modules on her own web server while studying for a Bachelor's of Science in the late 90s. Realizing a goal to develop independent games and apps, Sarah opened Smithsoft in 2012. In January 2016, development went to the next level, with Sarah moving to the Coterie to set up a studio at Smithsoft Games. The new studio's first title, Pandora's Books, was developed by Sarah and her team of part-time collaborators through 2016. And in 2017, Sarah founded ArtLife Solutions with a team out of the Creative Startup Weekend, winning first prize there, going on to win a spot in Collider Accelerator, currently working on Sortal, the startup's revolutionary AI-powered photo software. Sarah is responsible for all things tech, including the scalable architecture, mobile implementation, and deep learning technology. Sarah is an international speaker and expert in creative teams and agile projects, mobile development, and technical architecture for apps. She has worked for over a decade in her discretionary time on diversity and hiring and helping women coders. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Doing great. There's a lot that obviously we're going to have to get to in your bio throughout the course of this, but I'm curious how you actually got started in C++.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I did a few different things. I actually started out in architecture and fell into programming off the back of working with AutoCAD scripting. And I was just like, wait, this is seriously fun. And I'm finding that no one in the office wants to do this crazy scripting stuff. I think there's something in this for me, and I turned to programming, and I went back to uni, which was kind of hard. But I have this moment which I really, really clearly remember. I was going out with a guy who wound up being my husband in the end, but he was working at an office of OOC, which was building a Corba engine way back in the day with Michi Henning. I don't know if you guys remember any of the books by Michi Henning on distributed computing.
I don't recall that.
No.
Yeah, but those guys were kind of the gurus of C++, like back in the 90s, and I was like, wait, these guys are seriously good at, like, they were sitting around, with writing code in VI on their full screen terminals, and not an IDE in sight. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to be the best I can be at C++. So that was my entree, into computing. And I guess I saw C++ as being this kind of elite environment, and contra to the learning I'd done with like Java and even Pascal. I was going to go to the next level, and of course, we don't see too much Corba these days.
I feel like it's been over a decade since I've even heard anyone mention Corba.
Yeah.
So wait, now AutoCAD scripting is a Lisp dialect, right?
Yeah, it's that's right, and it was pretty obscure. I didn't know about the Lisp-like tie-in until very much later, but I think it was one of the things that people found very confusing, because it wasn't imperative, and if you're sort of working in that environment, it's very different from actually sort of using a pencil. You're sort of trying to do some drawing by writing this crazy Lisp stuff. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, that is just how my brain worked.
It's kind of funny to me, the comparison, because I think I've mentioned publicly on the show before that the Lisp module that I had to do in my in my computer science curriculum, I just couldn't get it. Like, for some reason, Lisp did not work with my brain. And C++ to me seems easy by comparison, but you started with Lisp, and you're like, well, I want to become an elite C++ programmer.
I know. I also used to own a Hewlett-Packard calculator with the reverse Polish notation where you had to put everything in back to front. And that also appealed to me, so I guess I'm just broken.
Well, what's funny is I never had a problem with RPN calculators, but I just couldn't quite, I don't know, anyhow.
Okay, well, Sarah, we got a couple of news articles to discuss. Feel free to comment on any of these, and then we'll start talking to you more about your career in mobile development, okay? Okay,
sure.
So this first article, Boost Outcome Review has been accepted. The outcome has been accepted into the Boost C++ libraries. We've talked about this a couple times. I think we mentioned it a week or two ago, and then obviously we had Nyal Douglas on. Was it like a year ago that we were talking about the first Boost Outcome Review, Jason?
I don't know. It's been a while.
It's been close to a year ago, I think. But it's been accepted this time, and he's got a couple more changes to make to the library before it becomes official. But definitely want to say congratulations to Nyal for doing all the hard work, and for Charlie for being the review manager.
Yeah, in a way, it almost seems like Charlie's the one that did the hard work here. Nothing personal to Niall, but yeah.
But yeah, this post that's on Reddit is very, very long and in depth, summarizing the review process. Charlie did a lot of work.
Yeah, I think with Boost, it's one of those areas where, like, grassroots development of the language has really shined as, one of the things that guided the development of C++. I guess I've been doing it long enough that I can sort of remember the days when C++ was pretty fragmented with so many different implementations, and I guess like way back till TR1 and some of those early things, it was it was kind of the success of Boost was really what, the traction. Whereas like standards bodies, there's so much theory, so much sort of greybeard type stuff. But, with Boost, it's like, hey guys, we're actually using this, this feels good to code with this stuff. And I'd love to see something happen with exception handling where it gets kind of a big update like this. So, yeah, looks interesting.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting to me results of the review was some people saying, well, it requires a C++ 14 compiler, and that should be a detriment. But if you look back at the other comments from Niall and Charlie, I guess, they said the first version supported C++ 11, but it required so many workarounds that the comments said, you need to get rid of all these workarounds. So they were kind of stuck in a catch-22. But the current version requires a very modern compiler, C++ 17, not C++ 17, Visual Studio 2017 with one of the latest service packs.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel if the trade-off is bloat versus requiring a latest compiler, I think I'd go with the latest compiler.
That's definitely the way I always go, yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Now I was just going to say the next article, C++ modules, the working draft has been accepted into WG21. Has much changed in this since previous drafts of modules? Jason, did you get a sense of that?
There was a comment from Gabby in the Reddit discussion about what changed, and it was something I think at the surface was fairly minor about reachability of things. And then apparently Gabby's comment is that, oh, sure, we thought that it would be easy to accept that comment, but it actually took a month for me to resolve how to accept this particular thing. And I have to be honest, I don't fully understand the details, but it's like qualifications of names and such.
Okay. I'm just wondering if, we've had some guests on somewhat recently who are very critical of modules. I wonder if any of their thoughts have been addressed in the new draft.
Well, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I haven't had a huge look at the module stuff. I did have a read on the CLang side, and they seem a lot more bullish about it. I'm hugely excited about this because I've worked for many, many years as a core Qt developer, and big projects like Qt really, really benefit from, tools that give you clean structure. And it's obviously not exactly the same thing as modules, but, issues like visibility and, clean separation, it's, all too easy for someone to say, oh, wait, I can just see this symbol over here in this other translation unit. Why don't I just, define an extern and just do some flyby brain surgery reaching over into that thing that I have no right to. And it's just, I think for years, like struggling with binary compatibility because of hacks that people have done was something that was very difficult with Qt. And I think when you look at the code that comes when you have modules in, say, something like Swift, or even, oh my God, Objective-C, it does work so well. So I'm very excited for seeing it in C++.
I think there's still basically a comment here that from one of the commenters on Reddit that it still is implying that there's some sort of magical build system that'll help us find the modules. So unfortunately, we're not entirely sure how that's going to ultimately look, but hopefully it really will clean things up like you're saying, Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. Okay, and then the last thing we wanted to mention was Dr. Bjarne Strustrup was named recipient of the 2018 IEEE CS Computer Pioneer Award, which is obviously a great and well-deserved achievement. So I just want to say congratulations to Bjarne for that.
Yeah, how many Pioneer Awards have you won so far, Rob?
I have not won any, Jason.
I'll just dust down. No, I don't have any. Yeah. No, sorry. Yeah. I tell you what I do have up here, though, is my Strustrup. And I mean, who doesn't have several copies of this from over the years? It's just His name is kind of synonymous with C++, and I'm kind of amazed, with my copy of Stevens and just some of the other classics. I think just about everybody has had his name sitting up there on their shelf all those years through their career.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my copy is second edition. Oh, no, it's third edition. So it could be older, I guess, but it's still pretty old.
Okay, well, Sarah, let's start talking a little bit more about your mobile development career. We talked about this a bit in your bio, but when did you really start doing mobile development?
Yeah, it's interesting. It really did become a thing for me. I guess it traces back to when I started working for Trolltech in 2004. I'd had my first gig, which was kind of a university job, and I landed this job. And I'd been playing around with Linux, and I'd heard of Qt and Trolltech, and I really loved what they were doing. So when I found out that they were hiring for engineers in Brisbane, because of course they're based in Oslo, and they also had a US office, I was like, okay, I'm going to work for this company. And so I pushed for it pretty hard, and at first they were like, yeah, I don't know if we want you. And I was like, So I said, look, guys, seriously, I want to work for you. What do I have to do? I kind of wound up doing like a period of time where I was sort of, on probation with them. But at that time they were growing really fast, and it was probably, I think, like a month or two working with Martin Jones. And, Martin said, hey, Sarah, you're doing great. You know what? Sorry about that whole probation thing, And then a year later I was running a team, and we had a really interesting time. Like, I actually loved the work I did then. And I guess now for people who say they're doing mobile programming, they're usually talking about stuff like Android and iOS. But back then it was the Sharp Zorus, which was a little handheld PDA, and you'd scratch away at it with your little stylus. And that was built using an early version of something called Utopia, which was almost like a complete operating system. So it was basically the top half of an operating system. It was built directly on top of an embedded Linux that we mostly kind of built ourselves. We had our own sort of tool chain, and yeah, it was pretty dense stuff, and it gave me an understanding of the whole entire Linux stack and developing for embedded Linux with C++. And it was, I think, it was an amazing grounding. It felt like launching a rocket ship. Because you would build these devices and send them out there into the world, and unlike server-side programming where it's like, oh wait, there's a problem in production, let me just hack into that right here and fix it. You had all these units out there flying around, crashing and having problems, and there's nothing you could do except try to make a new release of software and hope that people would get their Zorus out and flash that onto the devices, But it was kind of interesting times, and I think, with hindsight, I much prefer the current world of mobile development, where you do have, a lot more system software, so you're able to be a little bit more creative in what you're building. But we spent so much of our energy just trying to get the systems programming side of things right that you really didn't get a lot of time to actually innovate on functionality for folks. It was but it was a super interesting start in the world of mobile development, that's for sure.
Yeah, that was certainly before I was and looking for like handheld devices, that kind of thing. I mean, I had a Palm OS before that, and then later than that, I had a Nokia N800, which I don't think was related to Trolltech. I know Trolltech ended up being bought by Nokia at some point, right?
Yeah, it was. That's right. It was a kind of interesting history because back before Nokia kind of came on the scene, Trolltech, we would go to conferences, and over there, especially in Europe, there'd be a big cabal of these Nokia guys talking in hushed tones around their secret IP for their latest Linux devices. And I think they had a tablet back in the day, which might have been the N800, I can't remember. Would have been like sort of 2006 or so, something like that.
Yeah, 2007 it was released, so yeah.
Yeah. And I remember because at that time, of course, Qt was open source, and although I still bump into a lot of folks who have this, Qt was this closed thing and all the rest of it. Well, yeah, it was closed, but it was also open. You could you could get it under the GPL and open source all of your stuff as well. Or you could pay some money to get the closed source version. And it was amazing. I still ran into a lot of folks who was, you're that terrible closed source thing. Well, Nokia, when they took over, when they bought the company in, I think it was like 2008, they actually LGPL'd everything. So it became even more open. And still that was not enough for some folks. But yeah, it was kind of interesting how the two companies wound up on this collision course. And it to me, it was kind of inevitable. But it was really off the back of a thing called the Green Phone, which I think we launched in like 2006. And I headed up the team that built the content management system for that, actually. So this was before, like just about the time that there was an Android project. Andy Rubin would have been running the project that Google actually bought. And I worked on a system to actually download and run native C++ binaries on embedded Linux devices. And I hacked together this kernel patch that transported a key into the kernel so that you could then launch from initd this user space process that would become your native C++ application. And it would have, an entire security profile which was decided by a policy framework that dictated what it could actually run with as far as privileges go. And this was before the iPhone, before the Android phone. And I spoke about this thing at a conference, and I got into this conversation with some of the Nokia legal guys, and they were like, Sarah, it would have been awesome if you would have spoken to us about patents before you went and talked at this conference. I was like, oh, sorry.
That does sound fairly advanced. Oops. Compared to the permissions we have now. I mean, the way permissions are handled with applications, that sounds pretty advanced for the time.
It was very advanced, and it was sort of, back at that day, we were really in the mindset of Java midlets, and everybody was like, Java, that's all we need for secure apps on devices. And everybody was like, have you seen how slow these old processors are? We're just, back to the early days of ARM core. We need all the performance we can get, guys. I'm so sick of these crazy Java applets, because that's essentially what midlets were. They were like your browser-based applet thing running on your phone.
Right.
So, I mean, it was off the back of that kind of technology that Nokia came in and bought the entirety of Trolltech, because they wanted to have what we were doing in their Linux teams. And and it all kind of happened at the same time. And I think it was because of the growth of the ARM core processor and its capability that cell phones were going to happen. Like Apple, were right there on the scene with their iPhone. Android got bought and became a Google project. But the reason all that stuff was happening at the exact same time was just kind of ARM core devices, touch screens, everything was, coming together in the palm of our hands right at that particular time.
So I want to talk a little bit about the talk you gave at Pacific this year. I watched it online last week. It was really interesting. You wrote this cross-platform app for Android and iPhone in C++ with Qt or Qt. What made you decide to present this talk? What was the genesis of that?
Yeah, there was a few kind of things went into it. I'd done a training course a few years ago for a bunch of engineers from Boeing, and that training course was basically me standing up there for ages, like hacking in front of these guys, teaching them how to use Qt, and I hope they weren't building missiles with it. I mean, Boeing does other stuff, but yeah. Anyway, and I just and it was the idea was like trying to get these guys working with C++, and the message I was hoping to send was, look, really you can just write this stuff. It's actually not that hard, and I feel like, especially with modern C++, the fact that we now have lambdas, we can write type-safe code without having to, specify up front what the types are, without autos and all the rest of it. So we can be a lot more fluid and expressive. And I just wanted to try to say to folks, like maybe young folks coming into their careers that might watch that video, look, C++ is a great language for you guys to get going with, and you know what, you still can address multiple platforms even though you're choosing C++. And I guess too for people like us who have been using C++ for a while, maybe C++ is that cross-platform solution you've been looking for. You don't have to go use some JavaScript thing which is going to put layers of abstraction between you and the platform. I don't know if I succeeded, to be honest, in the talk. I think maybe I made it worse. Yeah, because I actually watched Chandler's talk at the conference, and I was like, yeah, Chandler looks to be pretty good at hacking CLang on the fly. I might just need to brush up a little bit before I try doing that. And then I thought, I've kind of just done the same thing with Qt, haven't I? Maybe I've made it worse. But yeah, that was what I was really trying to do there. So.
But I don't think you made it worse. I was pretty impressed with the live demo you did.
Yeah, the fact that you proved that you could do this in under an hour, and it worked. The last time I tried to write an iPhone app, I think I spent several hours just dealing with security keys, basically.
Oh, yeah.
That's so painful. And the fact that you had it all working from the Qt IDE was, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because the Qt iOS implementation actually started out with a community project. So I can't remember the gentleman's name, but a lot of the early work for that was done by a community member. Because one of the patterns that happened with Qt was some consulting would happen for a big company, and the big company and the Qt consulting arm, they would take what they'd done and it would wind up in some kind of module which was, not open source, not all that available. But for whatever reason, the early work on the iOS support was done in the community, which was super awesome. And Apple, to their credit, have actually used open technologies for most of the tooling around their code signing. So it's all open crypto. It's not like some crazy proprietary thing, which they could have easily done. And the result is that all of the toolchain stuff is able to be taken out of Xcode and put into Qt's project management system, which meant that when you're doing signing, it was able to be hosted inside of Qt's Creator IDE or even just your own build system, which is super awesome. So they did make it a lot easier. It's still quite possible to get yourself in a huge mess with iOS signing, but that's true even with Xcode. So.
I wanted to interrupt this discussion for just a moment to bring you a word from our sponsors. Jason and I had a super interesting podcast with Arno 2 weeks ago. He's the CTO of ThinkCell, the #1 graphic software used in consulting firms. He's still looking to grow his team, and what they offer is quite appealing. They work on extremely challenging C++ development tasks, and they offer more than pleasant working conditions. With them, you could be working on things like solving linear constraints for automated layout or reverse engineering PowerPoint with IDA. They have a large library of generic algorithms, extending the functionality of STL and Boost, in particular improving Boost ranges. So what you contribute could be used immediately throughout their 500,000 lines of product code. They're always using the latest C++ features that are available in the latest version of Visual C++ and Clang. That's because ThinkCell software is cross-platform for Windows and Mac. As for working conditions, I'm talking about no overtime, no meetings, no deadlines, and any technical issues can be discussed directly with Arno. With them, you join a team of 20-plus knowledgeable and creative programmers with a mix of young and experienced developers, coming from 20 different nationalities from all over the world. It's a family-friendly environment, and they pay €120,000 annually after just 1 year. So if you like what you've heard so far, go to thinkcell.com/CppCast to find out all about the job and apply today. You've talked about, how difficult things were when you were getting started in mobile development, and obviously we're in a different world now with iPhone and Android, but what are some of the pain points that still exist when making mobile applications using C++ and Qt?
I guess the biggest area still is code reuse across the platforms, and that's always going to be a trade-off between that and the degree to which you want to follow the user experience idiom or the sort of native look and feel. And I think, let's contrast two apps. On the one hand, you might have some ugly B2B thing, which is just going to be used inside of a company. Let's say it's, folks reading meters or something like that for the gas company. They're not going to really care what the UX looks like. It just has to work, and maybe they've got a fleet of Android tablets and a fleet of iOS tablets in the company. So that B2B app, it can look whatever it wants to look like. So you can probably get really high code reuse. Maybe 95% of your code will be the same from one platform to the other. And you can use your C++ stuff right across. And when you're in that environment, your cross-platform solution is competing with things like, Titanium or Xamarin or some of these other cross-platform solutions. And I really prefer compiled languages, guys. JavaScript, great, terrific. Somebody else can write that code. So, if I'm going to be doing cross-platform, I would rather use C++. And I think it's the other side of development where you're doing a public-facing app. You want it to look really good. You want a lot of fluid animations. You want to be able to show folks who are using the app the kind of things they expect on their Android phone or their iOS device, whatever it happens to be. And when you do that, suddenly you start finding you've got a lot more hash if-defs, you've got a lot more code that's only going to run on one platform versus the other. Your code reuse drops to, say, 60%. And then you start having those headaches. Then it's like, oh my God, which version is it that we've got the production issue? I'm fixing a bug, but it's not over here, and it can just kind of be a nightmare. Your continuous integration environment is just a bird's nest. It still exists, and I think when you get to that sort of level of code reuse, you almost want to just have a completely separate tree under your source control, and have a completely separate tree for your iOS versus your Android versus whatever else you're doing.
And you're saying, and that's if you're using Qt for the user interface for both of them?
Yeah, well, I think, you definitely can. And I think Qt compares extremely favorably with something like Xamarin. And there's actually other interesting things too. So folks are using game development frameworks to create apps these days as well. Yeah, so like if you've got an app that, say, it's related to audio, for example, or you've got an app that, has a lot of animation on it anyway, for whatever reason, using a game development framework is actually a pretty good option. And there's Cocos 2DX has something that's been around for a while, a C++ powered framework. Qt compares very well to something like Cocos 2DX as a development environment. Obviously, Cocos 2DX is free and open source, community supported. But if you're a sort of a corporate type person, you've got the backing of your company. Cocos 2DX is kind of, a lot of the documentation is in Chinese, which is a bit challenging for folks like me that don't read Chinese. If you want to have a neck to choke, like I'm paying somebody, give me a neck to choke, and C++, Qt, they're definitely going to be able to do that for you, because if you want to go and pay to have an environment like Qt for your commercial thing, well, then you can do that with Qt. Or alternatively, of course, you can use the open source version and stick all your code up on GitHub, and that's the other way you can go.
Right.
One specific pain point I know I've worked with mobile development is working with, like platform-specific APIs like geolocation or in-app purchasing, because that can usually only be done in like Java for Android or Objective-C and Swift for iOS. Does Qt provide any way of being able to call into those APIs from C++? Is that still a major pain point?
Yeah, it is. It's pretty nasty to call from C++ into native APIs on iOS. You kind of got to wrap that stuff through to Objective-C. At least it's all in the same kind of code base, because you don't have to marshal across sort of a language border. The symbols are all just right there with C++ and Objective-C. On Android, it's a little bit worse because you've got the NDK, and it can be a little clunky going from the NDK into native platform APIs on Android. It depends on how it's set up, but on Android, the way your C++ environment works is that basically your C++ binary compiles as a DL opened. It's effectively being DL opened, it being loaded in as a .so into the memory space of a Java process. You don't need to ever see that. The environment's all that environment's completely hidden from you. If you want to, you can just spend your whole life as writing your Qt app for Android in C++. But probably if you're going to be working with a lot of open source, at least platform-specific APIs, you're going to want to use a bit of Java. But Qt has actually got some wrappers for some platform APIs, and they did produce something called the Qt purchasing module, and I believe that is available as a free module. Quite a few of the very useful, like I think the mapping module, for example, might be a proprietary one, I'm not sure. But quite a few of the most useful, juicy, tasty ones that you really want are unfortunately sort of the product of collaborations between, like, Qt consulting guys and companies, so they've wound up being something that's kind of a bit proprietary. But yeah, those modules are definitely available, and if you're working in a commercial environment, it's just super nice being able to just take them off the shelf and use them.
Yeah.
So you mentioned in your bio that you are basically running 2 companies right now that are involved in mobile development, right?
Exactly.
So
I have
what is this?
2 full-time jobs.
How does this play out, like, in the real world? What does your workflow at these companies look like? Are you using Qt? Are you using these tools in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, so I have 2 companies. One of them is called Smithsoft, and that is me making money to put food on my table while I run my other company, which is a startup, and I have a co-founder, Magella, and together we're building this app called Sortle, which is it's a platform really that is designed with the goal of using AI to create an intelligent assistant that is going to sit in the palm of your hand and understand how you think about your photos. So, like, for me, I have I go to a lot of meetups, and if I take a photograph of a bunch of folks standing in a room, that might tend to be a meetup for my outside work stuff. So Sortle would be able to understand what those photos are, and it uses AI to do that. So the stack there is C++, at the bottom level talking to OpenCV and also to Google's TensorFlow framework on the device.
Oh, so it's doing the OpenCV on the device, not sending it up to a server?
That's right, yep.
Okay.
Yep. These days, like the multi-core 64-bit CPUs that we have in our modern devices are crazy powerful, plenty able to run 2 or 3 convolutional neural nets through TensorFlow, plenty able to run a lot of OpenCV algorithms, just like that. It's amazing. Yeah, 10 years ago, there's no way you could do it, but today, yeah, no problem at all. But yeah, and then on the Smithsoft side, I still have this, oh my God, it's the worst piece of software, and I wish it would die in a fire, but I still have customers using it.
We won't tell them.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so back in 2013, I think it was, I wrote a cross-platform editor for programmers to be able to hack into plist files. And just in case folks haven't heard of what a plist file is, it's basically a data file that Apple made pretty popular. It is actually an open standard, but to be honest, Apple's about the only people who use it. And if you plug your iPhone into your Windows computer, you're going to get a bunch of these plist files scattered through your home directory. And for folks that want to hack into those for whatever reason, don't shoot me, I just make the screwdriver. If you want to mess with your iTunes, that's your bag. Anyway, I built this thing, and it turns out that even though there's a couple of competitor products, they don't really work too well with the binary version of plists. They only kind of work pretty much with the text version. So people have been buying this thing. I keep jacking the price of it up, hoping they will go away, but they don't. They keep buying it. And in the end, I was making enough out of it that it was kind of paying for my desk and also for me to hire a Russian guy who, thank you, Sergey. I am so sorry about my terrible C++ code. I did at least write a bunch of unit tests for the back-end serialization because I had to reverse engineer the plist format. And I was really not confident that it was going to survive unless I put some unit tests around it. But the rest of it is just getting more and more legacy by the day. So yeah, so that is all obviously Qt cross-platform stuff as well. But yeah, that's my life. Oh God, seriously, I really need to. I'm looking forward to the day when Sortle takes off. And I can just find some, like I will pay somebody to open source plistinator just so it can finally go away for good. Yeah.
We also, well, you mentioned in your bio that you have had an interest in games development for a long time. How does that tie into your current life? Is that what Sortle's doing, or?
Yeah, well, so here's the thing, right? I'd been working for Nokia. So when I worked for Google for a time, I was in Mountain View, and I got back in 2009. I got a job with Nokia, who had bought Trolltech by that point. And, yeah, it was fun and all, but I was not enjoying it, and I had enough money in the bank that I could figure out what I wanted to do. And I spoke to my hubby at the time, and I was like, look, I want to have a go at running my own business. And he said, oh, you're going to do something, profitable, like making apps. And I said, well, I was kind of thinking of making games. And he was like, you're never going to make any money. And I was like, I know, but I'm going to try anyway. I did make a couple of games. I shipped a couple of games. And it was super fun. The one that I shipped in 2016 was called Pandora's Books, and it was a game about like unscrambling words from classic novels. So like H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, you could unscramble little words and stuff. And it was awesome. But I learnt some things about myself, which is I'm a lot better at programming than I am at designing games. Designing games is hard. Making them fun is even harder. Yeah, and, running a business is unbelievably difficult. Unbelievably difficult. When you are a developer, you're bracketed by professionals who do things like product management and marketing, all of this stuff. And, sitting there in Nokia, I thought, wait, I can do that stuff. Sure, how hard can it be? But it actually turns out it's really hard. Yeah, so... I loved game development. I really loved it. I met a whole lot of folks who were inspiring, very, very talented, much better than me at doing the things outside of programming in game development. And I did interview. I got offered a job at Telltale in Marin County a couple of years ago, and oh my God, I very seriously considered it. But in the end, I just thought, no, look, I want to keep working for myself, and I decided to go back into app development, and I'm now doing some app development consulting for some folks who want apps, and I do that on the side in the weekend, and I find that, I can do that in the weekend. It's not that hard for me.
So you got 3 jobs then.
Well, yeah, I kind of want the the other jobs to go away. The Smithsoft thing is like a container for app development, my games, Plistinator, and all of that stuff.
Okay.
And I'm still trying to take a big giant leap over to be completely able to do my startup 100% of the time, because it's more than a full-time job. It's like 6 days of the week, and then I do mobile development, and it means that I basically write code and eat and sleep, and that's it, which is very boring.
So how far off are you from actually making a public release from your startup, or have you already?
So we are about, we're working right now towards a big milestone with getting a beta release out the door, which will go to a bunch of folks who have been signed up for a while now to our beta program. We've got most of the stuff working, so we can actually analyze photos on the device, and I can't talk too much about how the actual secret sauce works, but I wrote a bunch of how can I describe it without giving too much away? Basically what it does is you've got a bunch of computer vision stuff happening at the lower level. It's all C++ stuff, and that gets synthesized through another layer that effectively applies reasoning to the outcome of the computer vision.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've got all that stuff working on the device. It's just a matter of basically doing the UX programming to expose that functionality, and also fleshing out all of the breadth of that computer vision stuff that I want to build. And I'm also wrestling with Amazon. Amazon, I hate you. Oh, God. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So very soon is the answer to that question. Very,
Okay.
very soon. We're also chasing investment. So, hey, investors, come and hit us up. Seriously, guys, give us some money. We could use a couple more programmers.
I'm sorry, can listeners sign up to be a beta tester for Sortle when the beta release goes out?
Oh, absolutely. We would love you to do that. So mysortle.com or sortle.io will also get you there. Or if you check out my Twitter, I have links to Sortle on there. But yeah, sortle.io, and scroll down the page. We have an area there to sign up for the beta, so we would love it if you would do that. It would be hugely helpful.
Okay. Well, Sarah, it's been great having you on the show today. You just gave out the link to the beta. Is there anything else listeners should go and look for you for?
Yeah, I have been trying for a long time to do some stuff around mentoring younger folks, diverse folks wanting to get into computing. So I would love it if listeners to the C++ podcast would want to get behind any of those kinds of initiatives. So, jump on my Twitter, or check out Women Who Code, or any of the other sort of diversity initiatives, and get behind helping the folks who are trying to do that, because it's great work. We all need it. We all want to have more diversity in our software teams, and you all can help out with that, whatever background you have. So yeah.
Okay, sounds great. Well, it's been great having you on the show today, Sarah.
Yeah, great to have you speaking to me. I love your podcast, by the way. Great work, guys.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for coming on.
You.
All right, thanks very much. See ya.
Thanks so much for listening in as we chat about C++. I'd love to hear what you think of the podcast. Please let me know if we're discussing the stuff you're interested in. Or if you have a suggestion for a topic, I'd love to hear about that too. You can email all your thoughts to feedback@cppcast.com. I'd also appreciate if you like CppCast on Facebook and follow CppCast on Twitter. You can also follow me at Rob W. Irving and Jason at LeftKiss on Twitter. And of course, you can find all that info and the show notes on the podcast website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com. Website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com.